Welcome to our webcast for December. Can you believe it is December? It's quite difficult here on our side, thinking about all the fantastic conversations we've had this year. 11 amazing speakers, and we've talked about everything customer success related, from how to design a QBR that your customers look forward to how to adapt a CRM tool for the needs of your customer success department. Today, with our webcast of the Customer Success Network, we're going to be marrying all of these together with a very special guest and a very special topic. We have the one and only Jeanne Bliss talking about how to create a company-wide culture of customer success. If you are in customer success, then the following titles almost certainly ring a bell. I love you more than my dog. Would you do this to your mother? And Chief Customer Officer 2.0. Jeanne Bliss has been in the customer profession for decades, having written multiple books on the topic and helped countless companies get on the way to earning the right to customer-driven growth. Jeanne is a true customer guru, and we're more than lucky to have her join us today, talking about company culture and customer success. And honestly, company culture is a topic which has emerged in almost every webcast we've had this year. Culture directs how your employees are treated, how they treat each other, but most importantly, how they treat and respect your customers. Culture dictates how your department is run, how it collaborates with our departments, and how it establishes a strong bond with your customers. Today, Jeanne and I will be talking about the best ways to put the customers at the center of your company culture. This webcast is hosted by the Customer Success Network. I'm Morika Georgieva, your host for today, and what has now become a full year of fantastic content. I'm a member of the Customer Success Network and part of the customer success team at Permutive, the data management platform for publishers. So what we'll cover today, we'll do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll look into the 5 competency framework, particularly concentrating on competency 5, which comes out of Jane's fantastic book, Chief Customer Officer 2.0. We'll look into how to unite a company under a common goal, enable the company to improve the lives of its customers and its employees, and then finally communicate that customer centricity once it's established. Of course, we're going to have time for questions. The aim of our sessions are always to be as interactive as possible, so don't hesitate to post your questions in the Q&A box. We'll make sure they're answered at the end of our conversation with Jane. We'll keep plenty of time for questions, and we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. Okay, so I'd love to just move on to an introduction of yourself, Jane. It's such an honor to have you, and I commonly say that so many times I've been talking about how this webcast is going to take place. The moment is like, oh my gosh, I'll be so excited because Jeanne will be on. I'll forget how to speak the English language, but here we are. Thank you for being with us. Oh, give me just 1 second.
All of you. I think that we are at the apex of making some great changes. The key is to really break this work into bite-sized pieces and make it accessible and understandable. So I'm really excited for this conversation today. I'm going to take myself off of video if that's okay. I just wanted everybody to see me and say hi, but I'll be here and I'll go back on when we end as well. How's that?
Sure, that sounds
okay.
Good.
Okay.
We know it is a very early start for Jeanne, so I appreciate you being with us and saying hello anyway.
Yes, my pleasure. My pleasure. I put a little makeup on, you know.
You had the time. You had the time. No, that's fantastic. So I just want to start off with, you have such enormous experience in all things customer related. So you've been Chief Customer Officer at so many companies, and you've written multiple books on delighting customers. You've worked with countless organizations. So let's start with this. In your observation experience, do you feel companies today have started to understand the importance of customer centricity being a part of their culture?
It's interesting. I think that there's things that have happened in the marketplace and with leaders around organization that have finally kicked in many companies. So if we could go back, clearly social media has become our friend. for those of us who are driving culture and business change, because the customer has the megaphone in their hand and the employee. And so it's not about what we say we are, but what others say we are that's most important. And so I think that has become a really good and important reality check for companies to understand that even if we develop a great product or service, it is all of the pieces that connect to deliver it, service it, et cetera. And that goes right to the heart of our organization and what I call the underbelly, which is how we get along, how people feel at risk or vulnerable in terms of working together or working separately, how well we can collaborate, what our starting point is. So that's the first big thing that I think was a help for us. The second big thing also, ironically, was that we went through a financial downturn a little while ago, and that also pushed leaders to recognize that organic growth from their existing customers is a very, very rigorous path to growth, to top line growth, as well as what I call earning admiration, which is, it's not just growing, it's how you grow, how you conduct yourself, how you trust your people, how you trust customers, how you improve lives. And what we know is that for all of us, you know, making your own decision, how we gravitate toward one company or another, especially with common products and services, has everything to do with the how of the business. And then the third thing is about our organizations. You know, right, wrong, or indifferent, we are organized into silos, and silos have been created with firewalls to enable the silo independently to achieve success. And so we build metrics inadvertently. Nobody goes to work and says, I'm going to build a part of an experience today that gets in the way of another part of the experience. But these inadvertent, siphoned off guardrails around each silo that lets each of us achieve our independent KPIs mean we never holistically solve for the customer. And so our CEOs are also getting a false positive as each silo is presenting their red, yellow, or green dots of the tactics they're doing, even in surveys, to say, get a lift on this part of the survey that I'm accomplishing. And so I think the third big thing, to make a long story short, is that CEOs and leaders are recognizing that the silos don't organically unite. We have to embed competencies, as I call them, skills and leadership attributes that make it not only all right, but the way of the organization and a rewarding function of the organization, that collaboration and common shared goals, purpose, and metrics are the way of how we build our business.
No, definitely. And the points that you're raising are fantastic, and actually very nicely lead us into what I wanted to move on and talk about, which is exactly those competencies that you're mentioning. So in Chief Customer Officer 2.0, you built an amazing framework to first earn the right to customer growth, to customer-driven growth, and then equip the business to achieve it. My personal favorite is competency 5, around one, leadership, accountability, and culture. It resonates with us because here at the Customer Success Network, we often talk about the fact that customer success is not a department, it's a mindset and a way of running your business. In your experience, in an organization, who should be the driver of making customer centricity the heart of your business, and why?
Well, and thank you for that. You know, it is interesting because in some organizations, customer success did start as a department, as you know, and what we're seeing is that it is shifting to a broader purpose, which is, do we even recognize and understand the customer goals so that as they're interacting with us, we have the same measure for what success is. Success is enabling the customer to achieve their goals. But if we don't know what those goals are, then we're making the metrics be about what we want to get from customers. So first and foremost, what we know is this is about leadership, the CEO and the C-suite of the organization, having a common understanding and a common language for how they drive accountability of the business. However, what we know is For a period of time, I like to say there may be an importance around a group of people or a leader uniting. In my podcast show, I call it becoming the duct tape of the organization. So, it's become very important for some companies to have a chief experience officer, customer experience officer, chief customer officer, because we're not looking comprehensively across the organization. I don't believe that's a pat answer for every company, but the 5 competencies, the way I wrote them, are whether you have this person in place or not, working this way is critical, and embedding these competencies is important.
Yeah. You raise a fantastic point here that a lot of organizations would have somebody sitting on the chief table as a peer to your CEO or COO, etc. But other organizations won't. And in fact, in the situation where we're in, a lot of our members would come from small or medium-sized tech businesses, and they maybe I'll be at the start of customer success, and often they'll be fighting to prove its value to the rest of the business essentially every day. Do you have any advice for them? So what do you think are some effective ways to convince leadership to invest in your customers early?
Sure. Well, and that goes all the way to competency 1, which is honoring and managing customers as assets. And what we find is that creates a language around the return, or the rings the money bell, if you will. In a lot of companies, what we're doing is we're measuring what customers say they're going to do in a survey, but what we should actually do is start the conversation of transformation and leadership around what they actually did. As a result of the experience, we all delivered. This isn't about the sales department. As a result of the experience, we all delivered. Did we earn the right to grow in this month, in this quarter, and in this year before annual planning, right? How many new customers did we bring in? Not only volume, but also anticipated value. In the same month or quarter or year, how many did we lose? Volume and value, because what we know is one customer in is not of equal value as the customer we lost. Usually the customers we lose are of higher value. And then what's our net customer asset growth? And the importance of this is that I also encourage people to use the whole number, not retention rates, so that we imagine the human life, the humanity of the stakeholder. So we brought in 50 new, we lost 32, and our net growth is whatever that math is, versus, wow, look at how many new we brought in, let's roll it up the flagpole. We're talking about acquisition, and we're getting a false positive because we're not looking at the people on the end that we lost. Then what this does, which connects to competency 5, which I know is important, is it encourages the leadership team and the organization as a whole to say why. You need to care about the why. And we need to recognize that the why isn't about one department. How you, for example, sell a product has a complete impact on the service experience. Because if you weren't completely clear about diagnosing the customer's needs, onboarding them correctly, service is going to constantly be perhaps compromised, and the customer may or may not get their true value, which will then impact how much they stay with you, bring other people, and increase your business. So that's why I'm a huge fan of customers as assets of the business, as a critical starting point, because it also creates a language. And it's simple. The other thing is, Marika, we've all been in the world of surveys where if you don't like a result, you can cross-tab your way out of it, or have a lot of debate on the survey methodology or the people answering it. We spend more time debating the score sometimes than actually internalizing that we have an opportunity. Does that ring a bell?
100%. And as we were talking about how we connect the different pieces of our company, I think that rings a bell with all of us. Like, everyone's been in a conversation with their sales representative or with their finance team, and have felt the emotions that you're talking about. And actually that quite nicely brings me into what I wanted to move in and talk about next, which is examining that competency in a little bit more detail, and kind of breaking it into it's comprised in parts. And the first thing that you do talk about is that notion of uniting the company under a common goal. So let's start with that in particular. We hear so many organizations talking about how their goals follow their customer success and delight and this only. But at the end of the day, we still see a disconnect between the company and their customer base. What are some successful tactics that you have seen companies use to define that one big common goal that makes customer happiness and success, that puts them at the heart of the company, not only in customer success minds, but also in the rest of your departments?
In terms of actions and culture is what you're saying?
Yeah, I would definitely. I think that's where we're going. How do we ensure that not only customer success, but also your salespeople and your product people,
Yep.
And your legal team and your operations all agree that we should together put the customer first?
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think that part of what happens with this work is that we don't get clear on customer goals. And so we're measuring success in programs and action items. We're not measuring success in the customer being able to articulate in their own words what they were able to accomplish as a result of their engagement with us. So for example, we were working with a large SaaS client who was really, really sure that they were doing a great job at the beginning of what they were thinking of as the pipeline. I have a problem with the pipeline word anyway, but at the beginning of the pipeline, by their website and what they were providing, and their KPIs or their metrics that they were measuring were how much time the customer was on the site and how many things they downloaded. Okay, you know what I'm about to say, right? So we brought all their customers in, and the customers said, look, we're on your site for so long because you've organized around products, not around my goals and what I'm trying to achieve. And I have to download so many articles because I can't get what I need in one article. This is totally internally centered and product centered and you centered. And so this is the beginning of the work, Marika, is that we have to rethink the metrics from the customer's point of view. And we have to be willing to recognize that today we're giving ourselves a false positive because we're measuring the wrong thing.
Definitely. Do you think that, is it a good idea to have, say, to work together with representatives from different parts of the organization? Because that's another thing that we hear quite often is, oh, we sat together with our product people and with our sales people and somebody else, and we decided that we're all going to be motivated by the same metrics. Is that maybe bringing us a little bit too close and putting everyone under the same common denominator? Like, where do we work together, and where do we put the, I suppose, border that everyone's actually looking after a part of the customer journey?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the key there too is that we are, to your point, defining the journey the same way. And more importantly, I'm starting to call it the goals, not the journey, because when you think about a journey, it's almost linearly saying the customer is going to do A, then B, then C. Well, the customer doesn't do that. The customer is trying to do something, and then they go find some more information, and then they come back and they switch around. And so it's the clarity of the goals. And, you know, often we start this work without talking to customers. And we're building our whole business around internal goals, or what always was, versus what customers need.
Yep, and that's a great point. Related to that, actually, we have a question that's coming from one of our members in the community, Mike Ferry. Sadly, it's not always the case that every department is aligned under the same customer-related goal, as we just talked about. When this is the situation at hand, what are some good tactics that you've seen used to get buy-in from those at your business who don't necessarily understand the customer mindset shift?
Well, I think the key here is also gets back to leadership. What we find is that we need to give people examples and behaviors to model. So we're sometimes in the beginning, we're looking for what I call symbolic actions. This is what we used to measure this. For example, in a world of simple sending people out to call on customers, the metric for many years was how many calls did you make, so that you're ticking boxes. Okay, I saw 5 customers today. Yeah. We weren't talking about the outcomes, or if we help them achieve goals, we were simply ticking boxes. And so a big shift now is take the time to understand the customer and what they need and their goals. Spend, it's less about the volume of boxes you ticked and more about the outcome of what you helped the customer with. But that's a huge shift. Mm-hmm. And it also has to then say, and here's how we're going to now compensate you. And it also then has to be backed up with the questions the leaders ask, because you can't half bake your way into this. If we say that it's going to be about quality, not quantity, but the first thing the salespeople are asked when they get back is how many calls did you make today? The whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think leadership by example is an amazing concept, and one that inspires everyone. Nicely brings us into our next kind of topic of conversation is exactly that leadership by example, and the ability of your company to improve the lives of those that are connected to it. And I often think to myself, so I've been in a situation where I've been a leader, and that I've been inspired by other leaders. And I think that we all want to be leading by example, and we all want to be led by example, but maybe due to human nature itself, this is often not as easy as it seems. So your leaders become a bit too busy keeping up with the rules, managing, get stuck delivering more KPIs, and your ordinary employees don't really think that they are senior enough to be the ones leading by examples. So what can leaders do to ensure that their company is the one where leadership by example is the key part of their culture?
Again, I think it's interesting because as people leading these transformations, if you're a customer success leader or chief customer officer, what leaders want, I call them recipe cards, or tell me what should we do at the beginning of every meeting. Often we will say at the beginning of every key meeting, just talk about your customer assets in and out and care about what happened, and tell some anecdotes and have your employees involved in talking about the why. And so what we need to do, what we find is 3 things are critical. Number one, that what we know is behavior modification, which is what this is, occurs with clarity and simplicity. So find 1 or 2 things that will always start every meeting. Find 1 or 2 things where leaders will always, how they will ask. So instead of, for example, going around the table and doing the silo report out, maybe you do the report out by customer goal and teams of people who are working together. And then the third thing is uniting the leadership team so they're saying this in a common way. If you've got 1 leader who believes and 5 that say, oh, that's the CEO's pet project, and then they go off and do their own rogue thing, this will fall apart.
Well, unity is so important. And one thing that I also really loved you saying there is exactly that behavioral modification. Some companies, we said, our customer success was there when they were created and they're small and they have their own challenges, but some companies are going through transformations to become customer centric, and that's really not easy. Do you think there's something in particular that we should be doing for behavior in particular? So not necessarily how your company is structured or anything, but our day-to-day behaviors. What can we do to contribute to a more customer-centric culture on all levels of the organization?
Well, one of the things, it's a real great question. One of the things that I especially address in the Mom book, and that we're addressing, in this work going forward, is how are you enabling your people to rise? Here's a great exercise we have done with every kind of organization. By customer goal, bring your employees in. Every level of employee is impacted by this, and say, in this goal or stage of the journey, if you want, what's getting in your way of delivering value? Because again, we may be feeling that sometimes we're managing by rules and process rather than giving our people in the moment the ability to, for example, know the lifetime value of a customer and have at their fingertips a variety of options for how to solve it. Versus you've got a really high value customer that's being cared for, and the person caring for them is penned in by rules and then has to keep going to ask permission to act. And so this notion of trusting your employees, not only with the information, but with making the call in the moment to honor and grow that customer asset, that's going to be much more relevant and impactful than some random rule we created in a boardroom somewhere. Yes. But that's this notion of what I call leadership bravery, which is being brave enough to hire the right people and then enable them to act.
And we quite often see this as customers as well, don't we? When we feel like we're talking to a part of a business that's ready to break the rules for us, or that's ready to do something that, you know, is going to take them out of their way so that they make our life easier, it impacts your customers dramatically.
That's right. And again, I think so much of what we've done in a very well-intentioned way, again, none of this is intentional. In an inadvertent and unintentional way is we create metrics, KPIs, and rules that pen our people in and diminish their spirit. And also, importantly, say to the customer, look, we're going to give you a runaround on this. Yeah. You know, and you think about your own life as a customer, especially a valued customer, when you, let's say your warranty is 2 days out of warranty, or you're asking for an exception on something, or whatever it is, the first question you ask when they say, well, I can't, or I have to ask for permission, is what? Don't you know how valuable I am? Yep. Or more simply, don't you know who I am as your customer? And so the forces that start playing in that leave memory in your head, and this is about B2B and B2C, that this is the kind of company that's going to question you and questions their people. And now I've got to arm wrestle for what feels like should be my right and their respect of me to help me achieve my goals. And this really starts to erode not only value, but how you feel about the company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it brings us back to something that you said at the start, that, hey, that was something really bad to do 10 years ago. But if you as a company do something like this to your customers today, social media will get involved 9 out of 10 times, and they work. And it's not going to be to your benefit as a company. It's something that we often talk about here at the CSN as well, how we communicate not only with our customers, but also how do we communicate inside our own company to make sure that we're all aligned. And that's actually my final point that I wanted to raise before we turn to the audience for questions, because trust me, they are coming in, plenty of them. So imagine that we've reached a point where leadership is aligned on the way in which customer success is part of their culture and customers are the heart of their business. That's a long and challenging process sometimes, but a key part of it is, I suppose, to ensure that the vision is disseminated across the entire company. What is your advice to help ensure that our company culture is truly ingrained in our thoughts? How do we communicate that so that it doesn't just sit on our leadership table, but trickles through the organization?
Yeah, no, it's really important. And I think a big part of that is in this competency 2 and 3 that I talk about, which is build the frame for the language of the business, or the blueprint. You know, really, we need to get clear on customer goals. And the way you get clear on customer goals is bringing everybody in defining them, bringing different parts of the organization in watching and listening and engaging with customers as you validate what those are. And then the repetitive nature of how you let and give people the ability to ask for and drive accountability. And one of the things that we do a lot, we talk about it in Competency 5, is, for example, something simple like building a customer room. You know, every month or quarter, walk through the life of the customer by goal, aggregate your listening. Maybe you do one goal at a time and show the paperwork trail they have to go through, how many people they have to communicate with, how much stuff they have to download, and then continuously bring people back to this one company understanding. And then if you're doing it at a senior level, but also give everybody across the organization to follow that same kind of frame in their part of the world. I think the other thing that's really critical is, as leaders are getting presentations and feedback, they need to keep pressing on, have you connected with your partners to make sure this is a complete customer solution versus a silo-based solution?
Yeah. So how do you mean a complete customer solution? Is that maybe, are we touching on the fact that on every project that we're running, we should have eyes on various parts of the business? Or is there like a way in which we can scale that and put a more efficient process in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you put the word experience after everything that comes up. So for example, we tend to look at things as projects. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's say we get a lot of complaints about billing, right? Who doesn't? So the CEO will say, hey, Joe, you run billing. Will you fix the bill? Well, we're not talking about fixing the bill. We're talking about fixing the billing experience. So I've started calling it not the bill, but the was it worth it experience, right? Because when you get a bill, you go back, you cycle back through everything. Guess what the bill is all about? How was it sold to the customer upstream? Did they understand what they've sold? Did they understand the terms? Were they delivered value along the way? So the billing experience has got to include upstream things and downstream things, because if you just hand it over to Joe and his billing department, great guys, great women, they're going to fix the reason codes on the bill, the typeface of the bill, the cycle time of how fast the bill goes out, but they're not going to solve the experience that the customer's having, questioning, which is starting to erode your value, which is, I got a bill for something I didn't understand, or this isn't what I thought I was going to get from you, or all of these other things that erupt because of the bill. Yeah. So think about, sometimes we call it the sales and service experience. Well, the customer doesn't think about it as the sales and service experience. They think about it as keep my website running experience, or we worked for a large airplane manufacturer who sold planes to high wealth individuals, the keep me flying experience, or the keep my automation running experience, or the keep my chat box going experience, or the keep my people informed experience, whatever it is. But instead, we even name the stages of the experience or the goals by our internal silos.
Yeah, we do that, don't we? And, you know, this has reminded me of another webcast we've done a couple of months ago about who owns the customer experience. And we very much like to go into a leadership room and say, you own this, you own the customer experience, you own the sales experience, you own something else. And at the Customer Success Network, one of our biggest, I suppose, guiding principles is that everybody owns the customer experience. Every single part of your business owns the customer experience, and customer success department is the beating heart and the constant reminder and driver for us to stay accountable for our customers and to deliver on our promises to them, really.
Yes, exactly. And again, I think it's interesting because we're so used to asking the silo questions, the internal KPI questions, and by the way we talk about experience is PowerPoints, dashboards, and metrics on a piece of paper. This is not the life. We need to take how we have the conversation about the customer off the deck and illustrate the experience. We need to make the conversation about the experience experiential.
Yep. so we can feel it together with them.
Well, yeah, and move people to caring about the why.
Definitely. Absolutely. This kind of brings us to the end of the questions that I had, but I'm very keen to open it up to our audience. And we do have a number of those, so I'm going to move straight into the audience questions. We have a couple of questions coming from Julie over here.
Yep. Hi, Julie.
Sorry?
No, I was just saying hi to Julie.
Hi, Julie. So first one is bringing us back to our conversations about metrics. So how would you measure success of each of our departments, and what is the place, she's asking, of scaling actions facing capacity? I would imagine that this is related to, you know, how do you...
It is interesting. Good question, Julie. So here's what we've been doing. Once we are in agreement and alignment on the customer goals that we have to build our operating business around, we then will inventory all the stuff that's been on everybody's plates and their queues and has been approved, right? Because again, in a very well-intentioned way, people have created a proliferation of projects, but these projects may or may not be around customer goals, and there may be projects doing multiple things at the same time, which is impacting capacity. Yep. So we inventory these things, and we have to make some hard choices about what will stay and what will go, or do we rethink everything we're doing? Probably not. But pick a few things, because what's happening is, again, our CEO, without doing this exercise, will look at all of these, and everybody's renaming their projects to have customer experience in them too, right? So it's just this relabeling. We're giving our CEOs a false positive because we're measuring commitment by number of projects. And, you know, the customer isn't feeling the change. So number one, get an agreement on these goals, organized and united by the organization. Look at what you're doing now and make some hard decisions. Pick a couple things that mean the most, and then on a regular basis, we have to go back to the customer. I don't like doing it with surveys. You can do some surveys, but go back to the customers in real time and ask about their goal achievement and how it's working and what's not working. Out of that, you can then perhaps also guide more strategic questions, because we're asking the customer, how was your phone call? We're not asking, you know, did we help you achieve blah, blah, blah goal that's important to you? And are we marketing back to the customer? So, you know, I think that's a big part of it, is that measuring success starts with reconfiguring what we consider success, uniting the success, and then having other methods for defining success beyond survey goals.
Definitely. Thank you for that.
Sure.
We'll move over to a question from Iram. Our business strategy is such that our current customers are only a stepping stone to a much wider customer base. Our current customers are required to enable us to build a service for the prospective larger customer base. Our worry is that if we focus too much on our current customers, we miss the opportunity to access the wider customer base. Is it possible for us to be customer-centric as a company, looking at both things?
Oh, that's a great question. And absolutely. You know, what we know is when you've got, and this is happening in all companies, big companies. So you've got, you're always going to have an 80-20 rule. 20% of the customers contribute 80% because they're your big guys. But you also have a high volume of smaller customers who also, as en masse, as a group, contribute a lot. The key here is figuring out the servicing model or the experience model for the large customers, and then the servicing model for the smaller customers. What we find that smaller customers like the most is when we can facilitate networking and learning among them as part of value add, because we don't have the bandwidth to deliver the customized service that we can to our larger customers. But with AI and other automated things, you should be able to at least acknowledge who they are, understand who they are, and then if you've got learning in there, you can start providing them with what feels like customized information for them. But there's work that has to go into that so that you can provide a more focused experience model with your larger clients, and then a more customized experience model with your smaller customers, but that are built on perhaps groups of deliverables versus customized deliverables for each.
Definitely. Thank you. We've got Charlie tuning in with a question around customer journeys. So fantastic content so far. Thank you, Charlie. At what stage of the customer journey should customer success try to identify and align customer objectives and metrics for success with the customers themselves? At what cadence would you recommend for reviewing these and revising if necessary?
Well, I'm a believer that there's not really a line in the sand where sales starts and service or success takes over. Mm-hmm. What we're finding is that when the team is in place for the customer, even at the beginning, when it feels like selling, I don't like the word selling isn't exactly right, but helping to add value, because in the very beginning, the customer is going to be telling you who they are and what they're trying to solve for. And if customer success is there in those conversations, then from the very beginning, you have an intimate understanding. Even if that person does not become a customer, what it does for customer success is create an awareness and understanding of the life of the customer. So again, when we think about it as stages, it puts us in a position of saying we don't click in until the fourth stage. When you think about it instead of goals, you then can say, okay, if the customer's goal is to define the problem they're trying to solve, gosh, it makes sense customer success would be there.
Yep, definitely. And on that notion with the fluidity between departments, another question from Julie. Should customer success be separate from sales? Because to me, it seems that there is a conflict of interest if this is not the case.
I'm not sure what it means by conflict of interest. The goals of the organization should be to help people recognize the value that we deliver. But even before we sell something to them, deliver value to them by making them smarter. In classic sales service divided organizations, it did feel like there was some conflict. But what we're finding is when we blur the lines, it actually ends up helping the organization grow more organically. What we know also is that the metrics of sales needs to shift, and in most organizations they are, not just from being about new customers, but also about growing the current customer base.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we see actually a lot of conversations recently about customer success and sales working very, very closely together. A lot of people think about the fact that every account should have somebody from sales and somebody from CS working on it. So I think that's a fantastic point that you're making. We have a similar question from Claudia, but related to the customer experience department. So should customer success organizations, can they also be customer experience organizations? Or is there still place for these organizations to pursue, to work on two different pieces of your company?
I mean, the more you make your customer navigate your organization chart, the more complicated it is for them. And again, it's not to say separate departments aren't important because they do certain things, but you should, if you're going to have the customer work with different groups, you need to give them the guide then of who does what to help them, and make sure that, you know, they're not having to call 5 people and retell their story over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's for sure. We have another question from Charlie with talking about customer success, talking to the larger company about centricity. In what ways would you recommend success presents examples and the value of customer centricity and goals to the rest of the business internally?
Tell me more about that question.
If we were to talk about with if customer success is to drive the idea of customer centricity in your organizations, how do you suggest we go about presenting those examples of value and goals that we have collected internally
Oh,
with the rest of our colleagues?
well, the key is not to build it yourself and then present it.
Yeah.
The key is to involve those departments in defining it, building it, and validating it with customers. What we find is when customer success or customer experience or any other division leading this cordons themselves off as the builders and thought leaders and then pitches, it's not an engaged transformation. So when we do the work, for example, in the 5 competencies, we actually build cross-functional teams of 3 to 7 people to build out the beta version of each of the competencies. So don't put yourself in the position of being pitcher and a beggar, because you will perpetuate kind of a we-they thing. And also you inadvertently perpetuate this situation that feels like from the other departments or areas that you're judging or evaluating and presenting current state. The most important thing is to facilitate the conversation with customers in the room so that the people leading and involved in the silos come to the conclusion together about where you are, about the opportunities, and about where you need to go.
Amazing. What you've said here has really resonated with me. The fact that you would build a cross-functional group of competency in a business.
Right.
Out of curiosity, do you find perhaps some organizations tend to be more understanding of that customer centricity and are more willing to help you on that journey, or do you not find they differ that much?
Oh, totally. There's always going to be people who are sitting there with their arms crossed and don't get it, and that's where you have to involve your CEO to be engaged with you. So we will involve the CEO and the C-suite to really understand that the 5 competencies are an engine that are recyclable and repeatable, but that they have to be embedded with the leaders and then people cross-functionally helping them to build it. And it's a process. The first meeting I do with them, I call a Vulcan mind meld, where we have to get everybody even on the same page. And then we have to get everybody to agree with where we are today. And so then we have them do exercises, and it's in the book, such as, writing the quotes we want to earn by stage, rating the reliability by goal or by stage. And so you have to level set. If you don't level set first, you're going to constantly be beating against the wall of the naysayers and the people who haven't been brought along, because we have to give people a seat at the table for it to become their idea.
Yes, definitely. And it's how we involve customers as well, right? We want buy-in from them so that they can work with us to achieve their goals similarly.
That's right. That's right.
I think we, in the interest of time, and I think we've answered most of our members' questions. Apart from my favorite one, I think a fantastic one to finalize on is, how do you become a chief customer officer?
Oh, that's a good question. So here's the most successful people who are kind of moving into the space have done a number of things. They have been leading a part of the operation, whether you're leading service or operations. I've had chief technology officers move into the role. They have proven that they are a leader that can drive change in the organization. They have proven that they lead with the customer and employee in mind. The two are connected. And they are a proven collaborator in how they lead. They check their ego at the door. They're at a stage in their career where it's less about ego and more about enabling the company to rise. And so for that reason, it tends to be a later in your career role. But you can start doing the things that you need to achieve, run a part of the operation, people tend to think to become a chief customer officer, you have to just run a VOC program or this or that. Get into the operation of the business. Be a great leader. Be a part of facilitating change. Drive change that's customer and employee driven from within your part of the operation. Because I coach people on the competencies, but if they don't have the fundamentals of leadership that are required, it's hard to get them there from here.
Yeah, amazing. So everyone that's listening today, take notes. I definitely know that I am. You're looking for change managers, people who lead with the customer and employee in mind, and who are collaborators. Hopefully, we're getting more and more of these people in our community, and more of these people speaking to us during our webcasts, such as this one. This has been a fantastic session, Jeanne. I could not thank you enough for being.
It's just my pleasure. Thank you, and I'm so sorry about the time change. That's on me, everybody. So
that I think we'll forgive you. Thanks to everybody who's managed to join us an hour later. The good news is, as all usual, we're going to have a recording of that we'll distribute to everybody. If we're lucky enough, Jeanne, do not be surprised if we invite you over again, if you have loads and loads of fans across our membership network. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for being with us for what is now over 12 months. It's been an amazing journey, and some absolutely tremendous things are coming your way in 2020. So don't forget to join us in January. Have a fantastic Christmas break, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, and if I could we send everybody to my new website, because it's been completely developed for them.
Amazing. Yeah. That is customerbliss.com.
Customerbliss.com, and there is a brand new quiz for you that I think will be very, very valuable. So go there, click on the quiz, and it'll be great for you to transform. So maybe you could put the link in there for that as well.
Sure. Let's.
Okay.
We'll put that in the email that comes over with the recording, so that everyone can take the value that Jeanne is talking about. Thank you for mentioning that.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me, Marika. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Okay.
Goodbye.